What is going on, New York Giant fans? Welcome back to another head coaching profile, the last one of the series, unless the Giants bring in other candidates, which I don't think will happen, but I've seen some stuff that has surprised me before. With that being said, our last candidate is one of the finalists, Leslie Frazier, current defensive coordinator of the Buffalo Bills. We'll talk about him. We're going to briefly go over his resume before the Giants. I'm going to start with his tenure in Minnesota as a head coach, then go to a little bit of his tenure in Tampa Bay as the defensive coordinator under Lovie Smith, and then his ongoing tenure as the Buffalo Bills defensive coordinator since 2017 when Sean McDermott arrived in Buffalo. With that being said, guys, like, comment, and subscribe to our post notifications so you know when a live stream pops or drops. Appreciate y'all coming back. So we're going to go over the resume first. I just want to pull up his profile real quickly. So Leslie Frazier is probably the oldest candidate on the Giants list right now. He is 62 years old. He was an undrafted free agent in 1981. Seems like a while ago. He was with the Bears for about 4-5 seasons. He was a defensive back, so that's another thing to add. He won Super Bowl, the Super Bowl in 1986 with the great Chicago Bears under Mike Ditka against the New England Patriots. So that's another fun fact about Leslie Frazier. With that being said, about 2-3 years after his retirement from the NFL, and he had a short career, he began his coaching career as the Trinity International University head coach from 1988 to 1996. After that, he moved on to the University of Illinois to become the defensive backs coach from 97 to 98. Moved on to the NFL as a coach for the Philadelphia Eagles as their DBs coach from 1999 to 2002. Was the Bengals defensive coordinator from 2003 to 2004. Defensive assistant with the Indianapolis Colts in 2005. 2006 was the assistant head coach and defensive backs coach. I believe Jim Caldwell was the head coach, or I think Jim Caldwell just period was with the Colts, but I don't think it was under Caldwell specifically when he was the head coach at the time. With that being said, in 2007, he took over as the Minnesota Vikings defensive coordinator. In 2008, he was promoted to assistant head coach until 2010 when he was promoted to interim head coach when Brad Childress was fired. Then was promoted to head coach in 2011 until 2013. 2014, he got the defensive coordinator job for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers under Lovie Smith. Had that job till 2015. 2016, moved on to be the secondary coach for the Baltimore Ravens. There is a video out on him coaching the Baltimore Ravens secondary from 2016, so if you want to look that up, please do. And then 2017 to 2021 and beyond, as of right now, obviously, he's not going anywhere unless he gets hired as a head coach. And I think this and maybe another opportunity is the only opportunity he's got to be a head coach. But at the same time, why wouldn't you want to coach that Buffalo defense? He's been the Buffalo defensive coordinator since 2017. With that being said, let's go a little bit into his coaching tenure. I don't want to touch too much upon it, but I just want to give out some stats, some details, Pro Bowlers, stuff like that. So overall, as a head coach in his 3.5 years, I could say, really maybe 3.25, his record came out to be 21-32-1 in his first year. Not first full year, because that was when Brad Childress was fired. He was 3-3. In 2011, he was 3-13. In 2012, when they made the playoffs, second in the NFC North, and they lost to the Green Bay Packers, the wild card game, with Adrian Peterson earning over 2,000 yards, he was 10-6. Then the next season, 5-10-1, and he was fired. I believe that's when Mike Zimmer came in and was head coach. So overall, I do want to look at some of the stats from his units, because this shows it's 10 years ago. Yes, I know that it doesn't bear much relevance to today, But if he's going to be a head coach again, we have to look at his past resume and see how he handles both units, not just the defensive unit, the offensive unit as well. And there is a thing with head coaches where you could hire a defensive specialist and the defense could suck. You could hire an offensive specialist and the offense could suck. You could hire a special teams specialist and their unit sucks. So there's a lot to that. With that being said, however, 2011, when they went 3-13, the offense ranked 18th in total yards per game, 28th in passing offense, 4th in rushing offense, 19th in points per game, 5th most sacks allowed, at least if I'm reading this correctly, 14th most giveaways, 22nd in pass play percentage, 28th in pass play percentage on first down, 11th in run rate percentage, and 17th in run rate on first down. With the defense, 21st in total yards per game, 26th in passing defense, 11th in rushing defense. And one thing about the Vikings, at least for the first 2 years, I don't know about the third year, they were always good against the run during his tenure. And then 31st in points per game, so they gave up a lot of points. 19th in turnover differential. Obviously, that also has to do with the quarterback play, which 3 different quarterbacks played specifically. 32nd in sacks, so they really couldn't get to the quarterback, but they were 13th in interceptions. Some just common notes off the top of my head and on paper as well. 3 different quarterbacks played for the Minnesota Vikings in 2011. One former Giant, Joe Webb. One former arch nemesis, Donovan McNabb. And Christian Ponder as well. He would be the quarterback for the next 2 seasons under Leslie Frazier. He was the first-round pick out of Florida State. Some other guys they drafted in 2011 were Kyle Rudolph, the current New York Giant, may not be after February, March. Brandon Fusco, he was a guard for a couple of years. I think he's retired now, was a guard for the Falcons, last I heard. And to be honest, I don't really recognize some of the names on the list currently. So with that being said, some just takeaways overall. Christian Ponder had 13 touchdowns and 13 interceptions. Donovan McNabb had 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Ponder threw for the most yards. Donovan McNabb was probably the most efficient in terms of completion percentage, and Joe Webb only played 11 games. Yeah, he played 11 games probably as one of the backups. But with that being said, 54% completion, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. So not great quarterback play. Looks like their offense was heavily run, obviously statistically, and Adrian Peterson was only 30 yards away from rushing 1,000. Played in 12 games, 12 touchdowns. Toby Gerhart was the second leading rusher, 531 yards, total of 1 touchdown. Then Percy Harvin actually had 2 rushing touchdowns. Christian Ponder had none, but he was the 4th leading rusher. Jared Allen almost, and I mean almost, clinched the sack record from Michael Strahan, had 22 sacks, but obviously it didn't help the defense too much because they were still bad. Behind him was Brian Robinson with 8 sacks. Percy Harvin, 967 yards, so only a few yards shy of 1,000, 6 touchdowns. Devin Oramashadu with 1 touchdown, 468 yards. And Michael Jenkins, Kyle Rudolph, Toby Gerhart, and a couple others down the list. And see if they had any Pro Bowlers that season. They had 2. Jared Allen, of course, and Chad Greenway, linebacker. He was named as an alternate. That was the 2011 season. 2012, the second year under Leslie Frazier, they made the playoffs. They were 20th in total yards per game, 31st in passing offense, 2nd in rushing defense, and 14th in points per game, 11th least sacks allowed, 13th least giveaways, 28th in pass play percentage, 27th in pass play percentage on first down, 18th in run rate, 5th in run rate on first down. Maybe those stats don't add up. I apologize if they don't. Defense, 15th in total yards per game, 23rd in passing defense, 10th in rushing defense, 16th in points per game, 19th in turnover differential, 5th in sacks, 22nd in turnovers, and 28th in interceptions. Christian Ponder obviously was not the focal point of the offense, as Adrian Peterson had over 1,000 rushing yards, over 2,000 to be exact, 2,097, with a total of 12 touchdowns and 6 yards per carry. Ponder tossed for 2,935 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 12 interceptions. Jared Allen had 12 sacks. Brian Robeson had 8.5, with Everson Griffin having 8 as well. And then leading receivers, Percy Harvin was about halfway away from 1,000 yards, 3 touchdowns, 677 yards, and Kyle Rudolph was the second leading receiver, 9 touchdowns, 493 yards. Michael Jenkins, Jarius Wright, Jerome Simpson, and Adrian Peterson followed behind. And in 2012, they did have 7 Pro Bowlers for a 10-6 squad. Adrian Peterson, fullback Jerome Felton, defensive end Jared Allen, kicker Blair Walsh. That's obviously funny to look at. Linebacker Chad Greenway, who was a replacement, Kyle Rudolph, who was a replacement, and offensive tackle Matt Khalil, who was a replacement. Team MVP Adrian Peterson, and then 4 All-Pros, AP All-Pros to be exact, Blair Walsh, Adrian Peterson, Jerome Felton, and Chad Greenway. Some draft picks from that year: Harrison Smith in the first round out of Notre Dame, Matt Khalil, tackle at a USC, Jarius Wright, as I mentioned, former Giant Rhett Ellison, fullback, tight end out of USC. Blair Walsh, kicker out of Georgia in the 6th round. Robert Blanton, safety out of Notre Dame. So obviously they like their Notre Dame guys. And that's pretty much that for the 2012 season. Now we get to 2013, the season that he was fired in, though he completed the whole season overall. Offensively, they were 13th in total yards per game, 23rd in passing offense, 8th in rushing offense, 15th in points per game, 12th most sacks allowed, 20th most giveaways, 17th in pass play percentage, 24th in pass play percentage on first down, 16th in run rate, 9th in run rate on first down. Take a look at the defensive side of the ball. They were 31st in passing defense, 16th in rushing defense, just 31st overall. 29th in turnover differential, 27th in turnovers, 14th in sacks, and 24th in interceptions. They had 3 different quarterbacks play that year, Christian Ponder being one of them, 7 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, threw for 1,648 yards. Matt Castle, the veteran, 11 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, and Josh Freeman threw for an interception, played in 1 game only. Adrian Peterson, despite some of the struggles from that team, had over 1,000 yards once again and 10 touchdowns. And in terms of leading receivers, Greg Jennings was the leading receiver. Cordero Patterson was fairly new to the team, I believe. Had 469 yards, was the 3rd leading receiver, but overall Jennings had 4 touchdowns, was the leading receiver. Then Carlson, Jarius Wright, Kyle Rudolph went behind him. And then Jared Allen had 11.5 sacks. Everson Griffin had 5.5, and Brian Robeson with 9. In terms of Pro Bowlers, Cordero Patterson made it as a kick returner. Adrian Peterson made it as, obviously, a running back. And then they finished 4th in the NFC North. Leslie Frazier was gone. 5-10-1 was the record. Some notable names they did draft: Xavier Rhodes, cornerback from Florida State. Cordero Patterson, Jeff Locke, punter. And that's pretty much in terms of notable names. So let's go to his defense 2 years under Lovie Smith, and I kind of was surprised just in his second year. Statistically, maybe Bucs fans can give me a different picture, but I'm surprised because it looks like the second year they improved a little bit. They weren't a good team, though, with that being said. So in 2014, I'm only going to remark on the defensive stats. They were 25th in total yards per game, 28th in passing defense, 19th in rushing defense, 25th in points per game, 27th in turnover differential, 19th in turnovers, 22nd in sacks, and 16th in interceptions. Some names to keep in mind: 2014 in terms of interception leaders and sack leaders, Gerald McCoy was the leading sacker with 8.5. Behind him was Jack Smith, 6.5, then Clinton McDonald, Michael Johnson, and then leaders in interceptions: Jonathan Banks, Danny Lansana, if I'm saying that correctly. And then you have Werner, Bradley McDougald, Clinton McDonald, and that's pretty much it there. Any Pro Bowlers on that side of the football? Gerald McCoy was their only Pro Bowler. And with that being said, they didn't even draft defense, which I found a little weird when I was looking this up. They did draft a couple of key names, though. They drafted Mike Evans, Austin Seferian-Jenkins, and that's pretty much it. Charles Sims was a running back for a few years with them. I don't think he's anywhere today. So that kind of shows what they were like back then. Maybe Jason Licht just looks good because of Tom Brady. I don't know. I'm just making a joke out of it. But with that being said, 2015, their defense statistically got better. And I was kind of surprised that they let him go. They didn't retain him with the new coaching staff under Dirk Cutter. So that's just my surprise, or surprise to me, however you want to put it. 10th in total yards per game, 16th in passing defense, 11th in rushing defense, 26th in points per game. So they still give him a lot of points, which is a thing with Leslie Frazier's defenses, whether it's him as a head coach or him as a D coordinator. Obviously, that would not happen in Buffalo. 25th in turnover differential, 17th in turnovers, 29th in sacks, and 15th in interceptions. I also want to add, going back to the Vikings, some notable names on the coaching staff I could give you right now. Kevin Stefanski, who was a lifer with the Vikings before the head coaching job with the Browns. Carl Dunbar was a defensive line coach with the Vikings. He currently is the defensive line coach or the linebackers coach with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Joe Woods, defensive coordinator of the Cleveland Browns. Mike Singletary, we all know that name. And that's pretty much it. Also, George Patton was the director of player personnel in the front office, who is now the GM of the Denver Broncos. Just to add there, I thought I would add in some factoids, some relatable factoids. Let me see who else. Also, another name to keep in mind, Craig Johnson, who was our former running backs coach. With that being said, I gave the defensive stats, and once again, I said I was surprised. In terms of the draft, they only drafted one defensive player, which I would technically be a little surprised. Now, I don't know how bad their offensive unit was. I really didn't look at that, but I was really surprised they didn't go more defense, at least another pick defense. Maybe they did that in free agency, but Quan Alexander, 4th round out of LSU. In terms of Pro Bowlers, they did have 2, Levante David and Gerald McCoy. The others were offense. Jameis Winston was a Pro Bowler. That's an interesting concept. But as I said, they let him go. They let the coaching staff go of Lovie Smith after 2015. They hired Dirk Cutter's staff. And let's see who the defensive coordinator was after Leslie Frazier left. It was Mike Smith. So, I don't know. He, I think, employed Dirk Cutter with the Falcons. And then once he was fired from the Falcons and Dan Quinn took over, they said, okay, let's go to Tampa Bay together. But obviously, that's something we're not really going to focus on. With that being said, let's go to the Buffalo Bills starting in 2017. This is really where it hits heights for Leslie Frazier and his defenses. Not really any names to keep in mind in terms of defensive coaching staff. With that being said, in 2017, probably the worst year. This is the first year of the whole new era, the McDermott era, the Shane era, the Bean era, the new era just in Buffalo. This is the last year with Tyrod Taylor. And they snuck into the playoffs. They snuck into the playoffs with a 9-7 record. Did they have any Pro Bowlers on the defensive side of the ball? Yes, they did. It was free agent signing Micah Hyde. So obviously there's that. Probably one of the few free agents that they ended up getting. If he wasn't a free agent, he was traded. That's probably what happened. If not, then I am wrong. However, he went to Buffalo eventually that year. With that being said, 26 in total yards per game, 20th against the pass, 29th against the run, 18th in points per game, 7th in turnover differential, 9th in turnovers, 29th in sacks, 25th in interceptions. Once we get to 2018, we'll get the blitz rate and all that other stuff. Leading sacker, it was tied between Shaq Lawson and Jerry Hughes. If you want to wonder about anyone who was drafted on the defensive side of the ball in 2017 with the new coaching staff, they did let a lot of defensive players go, but they did draft Tre'Davious White at cornerback at LSU. They also drafted Matt Milano out of Boston College, 2 great picks. And then they drafted Tanner Vallejo, who is still circling the NFL to this day. He's currently with the Cardinals. He was with the Cardinals back in 2019. But with that being said, Jerry Hughes had 4 sacks that season, and so did Shaq Lawson, who I believe was a draft pick of theirs from a few years prior. And then Micah Hyde had a total of 5 interceptions, 82 tackles, 13 pass deflections, total of 2 tackles for loss, and no quarterback hits, but that's okay. 16 games started. Also, I forgot to mention Jordan Poyer, who was circling with the Browns before his tenure with the Bills. 15 games started, 5 interceptions, 1 touchdown, so I'm guessing that was obviously on the pick 6. 1 fumble recovery, 2 sacks, 95 tackles, 2 quarterback hits, 4 tackles for a loss. So, we move to 2018, and the defense, once again, significantly gets better. Obviously, some stuff is still low, but once again, the defense overall gets better, and that's despite having a rookie quarterback who puts you in bad positions. Josh Allen did turn over the football a couple of times in 2018, but overall, the unit did well. They were second in total yards per game, first against the pass, 16th against the run, 18th in points per game, 23rd in turnover differential, 8th in turnovers, 18th in blitz rates, so they really didn't blitz. 26th in pressure rate, so they really didn't get to the quarterback too much. Second most missed tackles. Obviously, you could kind of just leave that stuff to the side if your defense does really well. 29th in sacks, but second in interceptions. And something to note about the Buffalo defense, obviously their defensive ends are solid. They're average. They're not, oh my God, Pro Bowl, Hall of Fame defensive ends. Probably their best would be Jerry Hughes, Gregory Rousseau, and Carlos Basham following. But with that being said, they're built from the secondary. Micah Hyde, Tre'Davious White, Jordan Poyer, Levi Wallace, Taron Johnson, some of those other guys. Those guys are the pieces in the secondary, and that's where they build from. That's where they start from, which obviously a lot of teams could say that's backwards, and a lot of people could say that's backwards because you usually build from the back to the front or the front to the back, however you want to consider it. But they usually start from the trenches and then move their way back. But obviously it works for the Buffalo defense, and it has worked for the Buffalo defense. So with that being said, Jerry Hughes was the leading sacker again, 7 sacks, 39 pressures, a total of 37 tackles in 16 games. And then the leading in terms of leading interceptions, Jordan Poyer once again, 16 games started. I can't talk today. 4 interceptions, 16 games started. Allowed 26 completions on 39 targets, 396 yards, 4 touchdowns, 94.6 passer rating. Total of 3 pressures, 100 tackles, and 2 sacks. So once again, despite them not making the playoffs and despite having a rookie quarterback who puts you in bad positions, and I think Matt Barkley also started that year a little bit, and Nathan Peterman as well. Despite that, I mean, listen, good for Leslie Frazier. He was slowly starting to get the talent that he finally needed. And they did have one Pro Bowler. That was Kyle Williams, who is now retired. Water feels good after you talk for a while. So, with that being said, they make the playoffs the following year. The following year being 2019. That's the year they did beat us. They were third in total yards per game on defense, 4th against the pass, 16th against the run, 2nd in points per game. So obviously a better points defense just overall. Prior, going back to his first couple of years as a D coordinator and also as head coach, his defenses overall were just not good in terms of giving up points. Now in Buffalo, obviously that's not a problem anymore. 2nd in terms of points per game, 10th in turnover differential, 8th in turnovers, 12th in blitz rate, 26th in pressure rate, so obviously not getting to the quarterback as much, but blitzing a lot, at least more than the previous year, 3rd most missed tackles, 17th in sacks, and 17th in interceptions. Jordan Phillips was the leading sacker. He would later go to the Arizona Cardinals, which was a little surprising because, yeah, he was the leading sacker. 9.5 sacks, 20 pressures, 31 tackles, in a total of 16 games. He started 9 of them. And leader in interceptions, that would be, of course, Tre'Davious White. 6 interceptions, 15 games started, had a 50% completion percentage in coverage, which is good. 43.3 passer rating, did not allow a touchdown, and 590 yards. Once again, not bad. 1 pressure, 1 sack, and 58 total tackles. So once again, obviously the offense around that time was really built around the run because they wanted to give Josh Allen some time to develop, and he wasn't as turnover prone because I believe his interception touchdown ratio, whatever you want to call it, was 20-9 in terms of 20 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. But with that being said, he still wasn't, fully there yet. He would be the next season and the season after that. But they went 10-6. They lost the wild card to the Houston Texans. And their Pro Bowlers, two of them on defense, Tre'Davious White out of the draft class of 2017, and Tremaine Edmonds. I forgot to remark that in 2018, but they did draft Tremaine Edmonds. Some other guys they did draft. Harrison Phillips, still a key role player today. Saron Neal, who's still on the roster, and Taron Johnson as well. So those are some key signings there. Star Lutulele was also a key signing in 2018, and he's still with the team. Defensive tackle. They signed Trent Murphy for a few years. He was a role player. In terms of other signings, Raphael Bush played a minor role, at least to my knowledge, and that was pretty much it. But with that being said, move to 2019. I obviously discussed that. 2020 is obviously where they get to 13 wins. They obviously got defeated by the Chiefs in the AFC Championship in terms of Pro Bowlers. They did have two on the defensive side of the ball, Tre'Davious White and Tremaine Edmonds. And in terms of AP All-Pros, they did have, one AP All-Pro, Tre'Davious White, on the second team. In terms of the draft, they drafted A.J. Epineza out of Iowa, who was supposed to be a top 10 pick, obviously fell hugely. In terms of defensive side of the ball as well, they only drafted one player besides Epineza. That was Dane Jackson, cornerback out of Pittsburgh, who is still on the team. But with that being said, 2020, Leslie Frazier, I believe, was promoted to assistant head coach, or that was the year prior. But with that being said, yeah, the Buffalo defense took a little bit of a regression statistically, but obviously not too bad. If they made the playoffs, you're not going to care too much about that. Listen, if your offense goes up, something has to take a bit of a fall. But with that being said, they were 14th in total yards per game, 13th against the pass, 17th against the run, 16th in points per game, 11th in turnover differential, 3rd in turnovers, 8th in blitz rate, 23rd in pressure rate, 6th most missed tackles, 15th in sacks, and 20th in interceptions. Their leader in sacks actually was one of their starting linebackers. No, it wasn't Matt Milano or Trey Edmonds. It was A.J. Klein. 5 sacks, 12 pressures, 5 tackles for loss, 9 quarterback hits, 75 tackles in coverage, allowed a passer rating of 101, 1 touchdown, a 72.9 completion percentage with 359 yards. Started 11 of the 16 games he appeared in. With that being said, Tre'Davious White led in interceptions once again, 3 touchdowns. Not 3 touchdowns in coverage, 4 touchdowns in coverage, 3 interceptions, 79.9 passer rating, 56.9 completion percentage, 454 yards, and started 14 of the 14 games he appeared in with 57 tackles. Obviously went over the draft class and told you that they lost to the Chiefs in the AFC Championship. With that being said, you move to 2021, where the defense hits one of the greatest heights. I'm not going to sit here and reflect on the 13 seconds. I know that's a meme. I know people like to talk about it as casuals. Obviously, they should have defended the pass better, but it's also Patrick Mahomes. So I'm not going to give him total heat for that. I will give him heat for early in his career, but obviously we'll get to that. Anyway, with that being said, 2021, they were defeated by the Chiefs in the divisional playoffs, 11-6 record. AP All-Pros Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde, both on the defensive side of the ball. Their Pro Bowlers were actually offensive. Stephon Diggs and Deion Dawkins. In terms of the draft, they did draft about 4 to 5, it looks like 4 defensive players, 2 defensive ends back-to-back, Gregory Rousseau out of Miami and Carlos Basham, defensive end from Wake Forest. They did the same with offensive tackles in the next 3 rounds. Then they drafted Damar Hamlin out of Pittsburgh, and then Rashad Wildgoose, who's not on the roster anymore, cornerback out of Wisconsin. With that being said, their leader in sacks, Mario Addison. I don't know if I read the defensive stats. I'll read them anyway. First in total yards per game, first in passing defense, 13th against the run, first in points per game, 7th in turnover differential, 3rd in turnovers, 13th in blitz rate, 1st in pressure rate. So I better hope to God that stat is right. But if it is, listen, good for them that they get to the passer like that. 12th in sacks and second in interceptions. So they're middle of the pack in terms of blitz rate, which means their defense can hold up in the secondary and they can get to the passer pretty well. Mario Addison, 7 sacks. He, I believe, was with Sean McDermott in Carolina. 7 sacks, 25 pressures, 29 total tackles in 17 games. Didn't even start a game. And then leader in interceptions like a couple of seasons back. We were talking about Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, both with 5 interceptions. Micah Hyde giving up 29 completions on 45 targets, 64.4 completion percentage, 3 touchdowns, 72.8 passer rating, 5 pressures, 1 sack, and 74 tackles. Jordan Poyer gave up 22 completions on 40 targets, 55% completion, 245 yards, 1 touchdown, 42.2 passer rating, 3 sacks, 8 pressures, 93 total tackles. With that being said, I'm just going to overall give my thoughts on Leslie Frazier. A lot of these coaches that win Super Bowls nowadays are second-time head coaches. Bruce Arians is one of them. Andy Reid is one of them as well, even though first-time head coach, he was good with the Eagles. There's a lot of them. Todd Bowles could be one in the future. But with that being said, Leslie Frazier is 62, and the NFL is getting younger in terms of head coaches. What worries me a little bit is even with getting a defensive head coach, and obviously Clint Kubiak, I think, was in his last year in Minnesota in 2013. So there's something to look on there. But besides Clint Kubiak, if we hire Leslie Frazier, any defensive-minded head coach, how are we going to get the offense going? Who's going to be the offensive coordinator? There's not a lot of attractive names. Brian Daboll, if he leaves for Miami or somewhere else, Ken Dorsey's going to want to coach Josh Allen. He probably doesn't want to even go to the New York Giants, maybe if Brian Daboll gets the job. But Leslie Frazier, yes, I know it was how many years ago, but that's also a problem. He coached how many years ago? He's 62, and necessarily didn't have a great record. He had one good year, which was 10-6, and it was basically carried by Adrian Peterson. And the defenses there really didn't do well either. I mean, obviously, in his second year in Tampa Bay, the defense got better. He was fired along with the other coaches on the Lovie Smith staff, and he got good once he got to Buffalo. But it's going to be really interesting in terms of my head coaching candidates altogether, since this is the last video unless they interview somebody else really, really, really late. Brian Daboll's my 1. My number 2 would probably be, I'm going to go with Patrick Graham. Number 3 would be Brian Flores. Number 4 would be Leslie Frazier. And number 5 would be Lou Anarumo. Those are the guys I would go. Dan Quinn would probably be number 5 or number 6 if he actually was being considered for the job and if he was wanting to leave Dallas. But with that being said, I mean, it's not a great list. It's not a pop-out list of head coaches, and it's not a lot of offensive guys, which I kind of see why, because in Buffalo they hired McDermott and they got Daboll over there, and the offense became successful later on, where the defense was pretty much, I guess, carrying the first couple of years, and then the offense got going, and now it's level, which is something I like about the Buffalo Bills. They're a very level team. Offense is good. Defense is good. You're not going to get that with a lot of teams, but we'll see. We'll see. Would I be surprised if Leslie Frazier gets the head coaching job? We'll see, depending on how his interview goes. To me, right now, it's down to Daboll or Flores. It would be really interesting to see the whole thing with Brian Flores. Obviously, he had to answer the tough questions, and if he's going to fight with John Mara on the Deshaun Watson thing, we'll see what happens, but I'm really pulling for Daboll. With that being said, if he doesn't get hired, it's either Graham, Longshot, Flores. It's just, in my opinion, not too much of a compelling list. We'll see what happens, and if it's right, it's right. Listen, I want to be wrong. If Leslie Frazier's hired, I don't like it, and then he turns into a successful retread of a head coach. Same thing with Brian Flores. I want to be wrong in terms of that. I would like to be right if Brian Daboll's a head coach, and I say, okay, he's going to be a good head coach. I would like to be right there. But if you guys haven't already, like, comment, and subscribe. Turn on post notifications so you know when live stream pops video drops. Appreciate y'all coming back. Hope you guys check out some of the other head coaching profiles. Hopefully we get a head coach soon, and then we can figure out who's going to be the offensive coordinator, the defensive coordinator, and so on and so forth. And then the offense, not the offense, Jesus Christ. The offseason will probably get boring. We'll be talking about the draft and all that other stuff, likely after the Super Bowl, because that's probably where I want to wait. But at the same time, if a head coach gets hired soon and it's before the Super Bowl or 2 weeks before the Super Bowl, then we're probably going into the draft stuff then. Also, keep an eye out for live streams on the channel, Boys in the Big Apple, all the good stuff. We'll see if we're streaming a Knicks game again, because that was pretty interesting. Anyway, guys, without further ado, peace out, guys. See you later, and stay cool.